There was once upon a time the Chevrolet Trax was a typical subcompact crossover. Boxy, small, efficient, and also affordable, much like all of its rivals, the Nissan Kicks, the Kia Soul, the Hyundai Venue, the list just goes on and on. But the subcompact crossover market should be more than just the intangibles. You should also be getting a vehicle that looks sporty, that looks fun to drive, that also gives you other elements besides just being affordable. And that's what Chevrolet has done with the 2024 Chevrolet Trax. As you can see from the outside, it kind of looks like a small Blazer. It's a lifted hatchback now, but also, dare I say, it looks dynamic and aggressive. And that's why I am here. I want to take a good long look at the 2024 Chevrolet Trax, check out the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and also see why, if you are looking at buying a subcompact crossover well below $30,000, then maybe taking a look at the Chevrolet Trax might be a great decision. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Herb Chambers Chevrolet in Danvers, Massachusetts for allowing me to do this review. The link will be in the description below so you can check out their extensive Chevrolet inventory. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. For car shoppers on a tight budget, the options available under $30,000 isn't as numerous as one would think. With manufacturers removing small cars from their lineups and the emphasis on larger crossovers taking precedence, a growing demand for affordable vehicles, whether new or used, has created an opportunity for a company like Chevrolet to pivot and reposition a crossover that could appeal to Americans if designed and engineered correctly. First hitting showrooms back in 2013, the Trax was an entry point into the crossover lineup for Chevy. But let's face it, boxy subcompacts have never enticed buyers in the US. But it's possible that with some aggressive styling, competitive pricing, and decent fuel economy, the Trax could experience a second chance at life by being an all-in-one impeccable daily driver that offsets the upward trend of expensive vehicles. Starting off with pricing, the Trax we have today is a 2RS, sharing the top spot amongst the trims available for 2024 with the Active, coming in at just under $25,000. Needless to say, a lot has changed from one generation to the next, but more important than the redesign is the chassis that now underpins this subcompact crossover. Unlike its predecessor that was closely related to the Sonic, the Trax now sits on the same platform as the Trailblazer, having a profound effect on exterior dimensions, ride quality, and overall practicality. For 2024, the Trax grows in length by 11 inches, and is 2 inches wider than the crossover it's replacing, being closer in size to a Honda HR-V, and is actually substantially larger than a Subaru Crosstrek, Mazda CX-30, and Jeep Compass. It's for that reason we believe the Trax is pushing the boundaries of what a subcompact crossover is in 2023, as its almost compact crossover-like size will give customers better flexibility and versatility. For ground clearance, you're looking at just over 7 inches, but it's highly unlikely you'll be taking on terrain besides pavement. Most of the praise for the second generation Trax centers around its new looks that draw inspiration from the Trailblazer and Blazer. Incorporating styling cues from both of its siblings, the Trax is now an attention getter, especially in the 2RS trim, as contrasting accents for the bar that runs through the grille and into the headlights add some sportier characteristics to the front fascia. And unlike what's typically seen in this segment, Chevy didn't incorporate an egregious amount of plastic cladding, which would have taken away from the road presence. Trendy, the LED daytime running lights are separated from the main headlight housings, and while the turn signals are incandescent, the headlights are full LED, which is a nice touch for a crossover priced at $25,000. Moving over to the side profile, the 2RS will be equipped with 19-inch wheels, which surprisingly didn't diminish the ride quality. However, you can get 18s with the Active and 1RS. A major improvement from last generation is that the Trax does handle quite well, with the suspension not being too rigid or stiff, but you still may feel the jolts when going over uneven pavement. With the 2RS, you have gloss black side mirrors, and we do have blind spot detection on this model. Then coming around to the back, the Trax does have a lifted hatchback appearance, particularly with the lower roofline and the way in which the rear fascia is rounded off. But taking on similar design cues from larger subcompact crossovers, Chevy's most affordable offering in their crossover and SUV lineup has gone a bit up market relative to where the last generation was placed. While pricing would state otherwise, the Trax's road presence doesn't reflect a vehicle that directly competes against the Nissan Kicks and Hyundai Venue, and instead should be in the same conversation with the Mazda CX-30 and Subaru Crosstrek. But that's all to be determined once Chevy ramps up production and further comparisons can be made. Powering the Trax is a 1.2-liter turbocharged 3-cylinder engine, producing 137 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with a 6-speed automatic transmission. On paper, none of these numbers seem all that impressive, yet the Trax has this uncanny ability to not feel slow, despite having a 0 to 60 time of around 9 seconds. Some of that can be attributed to the fact that Chevy didn't drop in a CVT, and possibly with the turbo, there's this perception that it's quicker when you're behind the wheel than in reality. Either way, for 2024, there's some inspiring driving characteristics that may surprise you when taking this crossover out for a test drive. Keeping the Trax as affordable as possible, you won't have all-wheel drive as an optional drivetrain, and instead, front-wheel drive is all you get. For fuel economy, you're looking at right around 28 miles per gallon in the city and 32 miles per gallon on the highway. Stepping inside, your eyes will immediately be drawn to the dashboard, as lo and behold, you have a full digital gauge cluster for the 2RS, and an 11-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility, which we'll take a deeper look at in a minute. Further enhancing your driving experience, you'll have heated leatherette seats for both the driver and passenger, along with a heated steering wheel, which all come standard for this trim. Now keep in mind, there is no power adjustability, but at $25,000, that wouldn't be expected from a subcompact crossover. Giving the interior a sportier vibe, there's red contrast piping on the seats to complement the RS badge stamped into the headrests to add some uniqueness to the cabin. Getting back to the instrument display, typically for affordable vehicles, customizability and intuitiveness aren't often seen in this segment. However, you have multiple layouts that you can showcase on this screen, including vehicle info, but you can also go with the minimal design if you so desire. Then taking a glance over to the infotainment system, this head unit is very simplistic and easy to use. You'll have icons mounted on the left side of the screen to get you to different menus efficiently. From here, you can adjust the climate controls despite having physical buttons and dials mounted below, turn off traction control, and also access vehicle and general settings. Most likely, you'll be using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto primarily throughout your weekday commute, and that's common for most user interfaces in this market, as non-luxury brands tend to keep their touchscreens straightforward and minimal. As always, you will have a rear backup camera with trajectory, and no surprises here, you won't have a top view camera. However, through the $650 driver confidence package, adaptive cruise control, rear cross traffic alert, and lane change alert will provide additional safety when you're parking and on the road. Below, you'll find a USB-C and USB input, and optional is a wireless phone charging pad, which also includes a power moonroof, but that's not equipped on our model today. Returning to the center console, you'll have buttons for the auto start stop feature and lane keep assist. And to round out the front seating area, for the center storage compartment, there's enough room for smaller items. Now moving on to the second row, we're going to start off on the passenger side. And this seat has been adjusted all the way back. It's also been placed on a bit of a recline. And I have a lot of legroom here, which I am stunned to see because for a lot of subcompact crossovers, it can get very tight. Now, legroom dimensions for the second row is at 38.7 inches. that would outclass a lot of vehicles in this market and price range, and would be on par with vehicles such as the Subaru Crosstrek, Mazda CX-30, and other vehicles of that size. This is phenomenal to see, because when you take a look at the Trax from the outside, yes, it has grown substantially, but for vehicles in this market, it can be a bit of a squeeze to try fitting in average-sized adults, and that just isn't the case for this vehicle. Also, with the Trax being somewhat of a lifted hatchback, I was expecting a lower roofline. And even though we don't have the moonroof equipped on this model, there's a lot of headroom here. I think if you're on the height of 5'8" or 5'9", you don't need to worry about hitting your head on the headliner. There's a lot of interior space back here. Now, what I want to see, though, is that can you fit a third person in the center seat? Now, moving on, to my surprise, the floor is completely flat. And because of that, that doesn't take away from legroom. And I've never said this before in this market, I believe you can't fit a third person back here. Especially if you have smaller kids, it could certainly work. Dare I say, this is somewhat unprecedented, because when you take a look at the Trax, at first glance, you're thinking, okay, this has to be like every other subcompact crossover right now. But if this is your first ever brand new vehicle, you can have your friends tag along with you on a longer drive. Then moving on to the driver's side, this seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I have an abundant amount of legroom here. But also, you're in this relaxed position when you are on those longer drives. So this is really great to see for a vehicle that is more of an entry model for the Chevrolet lineup. Also back here, you do get a USB and USB-C input, and unfortunately, you do not get a center armrest with 2 cup holders, but hey, you can't have everything, and at least we have interior space that really, I think, outclasses a lot of vehicles in the subcompact crossover segment. Now, coming around to the back, no surprises here. You're not going to receive a power liftgate, which we don't normally see for vehicles in this price range and market. The Mazda CX-30 would be one of very few in this price range, but you're paying a little extra for that feature. But behind the second row seat, you're looking at right around 25.5 cubic feet of room, which would outclass the Subaru Crosstrek and Mazda CX-30, along with a number of other subcompact crossovers. This would actually be more in line with the Nissan Rogue Sport and Honda HR-V. And in fact, it does outclass the HR-V when it comes to initial cargo space, which is pretty great to see. But also, considering the fact that the Trax is in the subcompact crossover market, it's great that it's not a refrigerator on wheels where you can actually get this amount of space. So I think if you are going on a road trip with the family, you can probably fit maybe 5, 6, possibly more bags of luggage. I was able to fit all my camera gear today and still had extra room to go grocery shopping after. Then with the second row seats fold, you're looking at right around 54 cubic feet of room, which once again is almost identical to the Honda HR-V. So not only is this crossover affordable, but also it's exceptionally practical as well. And when you take a look at the price point, it's really showing that it has a lot of value right now on the market. Then on the left side of the rear cargo area, you have a cubby for some smaller items such as a couple water bottles, car detail equipment, or maybe even a first aid kit. Then beneath the floor mat, and this is really surprising to see, now it's not a full spare, but you still get a spare tire. So if you do encounter a flat on your road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. And a lot of vehicles right now are not offering this. So once again, huge plus for Chevrolet right now. Also back here, you do have a rear cargo cover, which will keep all your valuable items out of sight. So if you are like me and you have camera gear or anything else of value, you can leave them back here and have that peace of mind knowing that no one will be able to peek in and steal what you have. Then once you're done, just grab onto the handle and close the hatch. All right, so we're gonna take the 2024 Chevrolet Trax out for a quick test drive. I wanna spend a lot more time with this vehicle in the future because I'm very intrigued with what Chevrolet has developed and engineered with this generation Trax. It's so unique in a way where it went from being this boxy subcompact crossover to now being a lifted hatchback, and it's also become a vehicle that is practical, it looks fun, and I really want to see if the driving dynamics match the looks of this crossover. Immediately, Since we are in stop-and-go traffic, what I do notice is that the safety systems are very aggressive, similar to the Subaru Crosstrek. But since we are at a red light, let's go over the vision that you have here to work with, because this is very different than the last generation. Starting off with the A-pillars, they are rather thin, so I don't think you need to worry about having blind spots when you are approaching intersections. What I do notice, though, is that since it is somewhat of a lifted hatchback, you do sit a bit lower to the ground, and the hood does stick out a bit, but I don't think that's going to create any issues when you are in this stop-and-go traffic or you're parking this vehicle in the city. Then taking a look at your side mirrors, they are decently sized, and of course we do have blind spot detection, so I can see what's behind me and in my blind spots. And looking out back, even though you have that thinner rear window and the headrests are in the way, I can see what's directly behind me, so a good amount of vision to work with behind the wheel of the Trax. Also, of course, when it comes to the interior, it's molded around you, which you don't typically see in a subcompact. The infotainment system is shaped towards me, nice digital gauge cluster. Also, we have a center console. That is unheard of in this market. The fact that I actually have somewhat of an armrest here, it just seems to me that Chevrolet was very deliberate with how they designed this crossover for 2024. It's like they've learned from everyone else's mistakes and they created a subcompact that just feels almost like a compact crossover in a way when you are driving it around town. So let's get on the highway here. I want to see what this turbocharged 3-cylinder engine has to offer. Not too common to see a 3-cylinder, right now at least in this segment. Gotta be honest, I like the steering as well. It's not too loose, it is fluid. Typically light for a vehicle in this market. Lane centering's kicking in. Decent pickup. Not bad. Now at highway speeds at around 60 miles an hour, road noise really isn't that bad. Now we have the 19-inch wheels on this model with the 2RS. It's not really creating much of an issue at all when it comes to the road noise. Sound deadening is pretty impressive for a vehicle priced at $25,000. A good amount of mid-range torque too. So don't let the figures fool you on paper. Sure, it only has just under 140 horsepower and 165-ish pound-feet of torque. But because it has a 6-speed automatic transmission, there's no droning at all. This engine is very responsive for what it's offering. Also, it does feel relatively planted on the roadways, so it's not really swaying out of its lane. So there is a sense of refinement here. It's also really quiet in here when it pertains to the powertrain, and that might have something to do with the fact that it's not a 4-cylinder. Also, of course, no CVT either. So unlike the Japanese rivals, you're not sitting there complaining about the noise that's entering the cabin. Even when you are on throttle, the engine is very quiet. The steering input to me is probably was drawing my attention the most, because a lot of crossovers in this market aren't really that enjoyable to drive. They also don't give you a lot of feedback in the corners. But the Trax for 2024 is a completely different story. There's some agility here with the cornering ability, which really does create some confidence. Now, I don't know if it's because of the turbocharged 3-cylinder engine or not, but at lower speeds, even from, say, 20 to 50, this feels quicker than it does on paper. 0 to 60 times are around 9 seconds. But for daily driving purposes, when you are on back roads or commuting in the suburbs, it doesn't feel lethargic. It doesn't feel like it's holding back at all. It's not like the Honda HR-V. The HR-V just felt extremely underpowered, which it has better horsepower than what the Trax is offering, and yet this is a completely different story. And again, it could be because of the 6-speed automatic. And speaking of the 6-speed, it shifts pretty smoothly, which again, you really wouldn't anticipate for an entry-level model or an entry model for a lineup. What I will say though here is that I do believe Chevrolet has a slam dunk and home run hitter on their hands. But all it's missing is all-wheel drive. That's the one aspect that's lacking from this crossover. Because when you take a look at the exterior dimensions, interior dimensions, overall practicality, even the ground clearance of around 7.3 inches, this could go head-to-head with a Subaru Crosstrek, Mazda CX-30, Nissan Rogue Sport, Jeep Compass. I really don't know why Chevrolet left that out. I mean, I understand that would be an additional $1,500 tacked on to the price if you were to opt for all-wheel drive. So I understand that Chevrolet wants to keep this being frugal and affordable for buyers on a budget. And as the guys at Chevrolet of Danvers have told me, that people are buying this immediately when they arrive. In fact, this is the only one available, and all the ones that are currently on order and should be delivered sometime soon are already sold. And I was a bit surprised by that, because up here in New England, you want to have all-wheel drive. You want to have a crossover that is capable. But on the flip side, when you're looking at a crossover priced at, say $22,000, $25,000, and you have that much practicality, you have this driving experience, you have this amount of technology, it's difficult to pass up. Not many brands are offering this. They're not offering a full digital gauge cluster at $25,000. They're not giving you a nice infotainment system. Now, of course, it is more trimmed down than what we see from, say, higher vehicles in the Chevrolet lineup or Cadillac, but still, I wouldn't be complaining if I'm somebody looking at buying a brand new vehicle in this price range, because it would be on par with what Honda's giving you. It would be on par with Toyota and even Subaru as well. So to me, Chevrolet has done quite well with this crossover. They've done exactly what they needed to, where it's completely opposite of other subcompacts. It's not boxy. It's not squared off. It's not uninspiring to drive. It feels like a very competent, compliant, and capable vehicle, and I just was not expecting that for Chevrolet's most affordable product. Another aspect that I haven't gotten into yet is the suspension, which for a vehicle priced under $35,000, expectations have to be kept to a minimum. But for a vehicle at $25,000, I'm not complaining. I'm really not. This feels very much like a Kia Seltos, Hyundai Kona, Subaru Crosstrek, Nissan Rogue Sport, Jeep Compass. You don't really feel the bumps and imperfections. I mean, yeah, you're going to have the jolts, especially with the 19-inch wheels, but unlike a lot of subcompacts that are boxy, that are cheap, that are very low quality, this is a stark difference. Now, I'm not saying the Trax is a premium vehicle for its segment, because premium and $25,000 have probably never been in the same sentence before at all. But comparing it to other vehicles in this market, this feels a bit more durable. It feels a bit more long-lasting. And also, it has a sense of a higher quality and refinement that just isn't seen in this price range before. This is certainly a game changer in my mind. And also, I think Chevrolet has engineered a crossover that doesn't feel disposable either. Sure, it has some hard touch plastics on the dashboard and the door panels. That's a given for a crossover at this price point. You're not going to have soft touch materials found throughout. It's not going to feel like a Blazer or even a Tahoe, but it is going to give you some creature comforts that a lot of rivals will cheapen out on. The fact that you have the amount of USB-C and USB inputs, heated seats, leatherette upholstery, Again, the way the dashboard is designed, this is rare and almost unheard of in this market. And that just to me goes a very long way for how I view this crossover moving forward and why I want to experience the Trax again later this year, because I think Chevrolet can go much further with this vehicle and platform. So to quickly wrap up this review, the 2024 Chevrolet Trax is nothing like its predecessor. In fact, Chevrolet has given this vehicle a lot of attributes, characteristics, and the intangibles to make this crossover very successful in the subcompact market. Now, of course, as I said during the test drive, I think it's one all-wheel drive system away from being a very hot seller and possibly being a top buy in this market. But then again, Chevrolet is experiencing these vehicles flying right off the lot the minute they show up. So buyers obviously love this vehicle even with it being front-wheel drive only. But I think it also goes a bit deeper than that when you take a look at the interior, where there's a lot of spacing as well. With a second row seating area, you have the same amount of legroom as you're going to find in some compact crossovers. Then of course you have on this model, we have a full digital gauge cluster, nice infotainment system, and I love the fact that the interior is more driver-centric. It doesn't look cheap, at least when you are looking at this vehicle for the first time. Of course, you're not going to have soft touch materials along the dashboard and the door panels, but that's to be expected for a crossover at around $26,000. But then also you have the turbocharged 3-cylinder engine, which is paired with a 6-speed automatic transmission, and that alone is worth taking a look at over a lot of vehicles from Japan that use CVTs. And I just feel as though that Chevrolet really focused a lot on what this crossover is giving you at this price point, that it's not just going to be cheap transportation, it's going to be something a bit more. It's actually usable for a lot of Americans right now in 2023. And really, I think that when you take a look at what's out there right now on the market, the Chevrolet Trax at around $25,000 for a base model over $20,000. I don't know if this can be beat right now, especially when you compare it to other competitors such as the Nissan Kicks or maybe even the Hyundai Venue. This right here, I just think this is a great option right now if you are on a stricter budget. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.